am a knitter in Edmonton, Alberta, and the weather has started to turn here a little bit. We've had some nice chilly mornings. It's starting to get a bit frosty. The afternoons are still like 20 degrees, and so the sweaters don't last all day, but I've been able to wear some nice cozy sweaters and a toque sometimes as I'm taking my kids off to school in the morning, and that has been adding some joy to my life. I am sure the snow will come in like 2 weeks from now and it will be too cold, and I will very quickly be like, oh yeah, I don't really like winter that much, but I do like wearing all of my knits. I've got 2 big projects to talk about today. I've had been working on 2 test knits that are both being released in October, and so I'm going to talk about these ones, and then a couple of whips that I've been working on. It's been a little while since I've been able to record. Last time I'd said like, okay, kids are starting school, like maybe I'll have a bit more bandwidth. No, I have not had more bandwidth to do much of anything. It turns out half-day kindergarten is not that conducive to like doing much or like resting at all. So yeah, and we've had multiple sick days and also broken arm thrown in there. And so yeah, it's been a very busy month. Probably that's just like, it's always that. I should just know. It's just always that. I was talking about in my last episode about how the kids are back in school. What the heck am I doing with my life? Yeah, turns out I'm just surviving. I don't need to do more than that. So lots of you left very encouraging comments about that, which I really appreciated. I think like pretty shortly after I recorded, I like also had a therapy appointment, and so that's what I talked to my therapist about. I don't just talk to YouTube about it, I promise. I also talk to my therapist about it, and also basically everybody in my life, like what do I do? But she and I had a good talk about that too, of just, now is not the time to like plan out the rest of my life. I'm actually still surviving, and that's great that my kids are back in school, but as I said, half-day kindergarten, multiple sick days, broken arm. Yeah, I have still been knitting lots and trying to just give myself permission to recuperate a little bit, maybe regain some of my capacity, and I very much need alone time to do that, and it's hard to have alone time when you're a stay-at-home mom. Sometimes what's tricky about also finding time to do this is it took me quite a while to get everything ready that I needed to actually like sit down and film, and like, oh yeah, I was gonna look up that thing about that project, or oh, I should double check what my actual gauge was about that because I'm gonna talk about that. And anyways, I had a lot of like prep time, and then I'm like, I went down the stairs a whole bunch of times and like got everything settled, sit down. My kids and my husband just came home, so there might be some noise from that. It's just my life. So what was I talking about? One of the things that I spend a lot of time knitting, right? Like I knit for large portions of my like awake time, but sometimes I'm not like I'm knitting, but I'm not like giving myself permission to knit, you know? It's kind of like when you rest, but you're not actually being restful because you feel like, oh, but I should be doing something. I should be being productive. And so that it kind of like, yes, you're like taking a break from whatever the like thing is you're supposed to be doing, but you don't actually get that same like rejuvenation that you should, because your brain is still trying to be busy doing those other things. And so I find that often with my knitting. And sometimes I can combat that by like, I've been listening to an audiobook while I knit, and so then that makes me feel like, well, reading is good, and so then it's okay that I'm sitting and knitting because I'm also reading. Or even sometimes just like if I have like a really good TV show or something that I'm binging, like that, I don't know, like to sit in the evening and like watch a TV show, that's like normal, right? So I just happen to knit while I'm doing that. I've been binge watching Only Murders in the Building, which I had never watched before, only vaguely knew the premise, started watching it and like burned through it. And so I just, you know, got through the first 2 seasons, and then as the 3rd season was coming out, and so I've just finished it now because I think the last episode was just this last week, so that was fun. I enjoyed that. Yeah, recommend that if anybody's looking for a fun show to watch. Oh, also lots of beautiful sweaters. I think I like vaguely knew that about it because I'd seen it just over the years as the other seasons had come out, but Selena Gomez has like very cute outfits in it and lots of like interesting knit sweaters. And so I've seen that kind of just crop up in like the knitting, like on Instagram and stuff in the knitting world. So that was kind of fun to watch too. But anyways, sidetrack. So I have been doing lots of knitting. I went to a yarn festival in September. I met up with a knitting friend that I hadn't seen since before the summer, so that was fun. I've got a spinning class coming up, and so I've been doing a bit of spinning and yeah, plunking away at these sweaters. So yeah, let's get into that. My first one is what I'm wearing. This is the sibling sweater My Size by Laura Penrose, and it's being released, I don't think she set a specific date, but the end of October. This is kind of like a companion pattern to her first version, which is like a kid's version called the sibling sweater. So this is sibling sweater My Size. And so I think the idea with the sibling sweater is like she made matching sweaters for her kids. And so then you get to have a matching sweater too with your kids. Anyways, it's a drop shoulder DK weight pattern. It's got an interesting detail on the shoulder. Maybe I'll try and show that a bit. Which you work right at the beginning. It's like, it's really simple to knit it, but it's like, I feel like it has a good kind of like high visual impact, which I enjoyed. I knit the size 6, which had a finished bust of 55.5 inches, which on me is about 14 inches of ease, which is a lot. Laura's original sample was knit with less ease. She knit another sample, she wanted more ease. It was like she wanted a bit more of that oversized fit. So I think her like final official sample is 10 inches of positive ease. I probably should have gone more for that. It feels a little bit too big for me, but that's okay. It's like, I've been wearing it a lot. The day that I finished it, I was like frantically trying to like, do the Italian bind off on the last hem, and was like racing against the clock because I had to go pick up my kid from school. I was like, I can do it, I'm gonna wear it while I go pick him up. And I was like, I can do it, like, you know, like pulling my big thread through to do my Italian bind off. But I managed to do it. I like have a Google alert for me to go and pick him up. It's like that had gone off. I was still in my pajamas. I still had my last stitches to go. But I managed to like finish it, threw on some real pants, threw my sweater over top. I like still had all my ends. I like shoved them in the top of my pants and was like, I finished my sweater. And went and picked up my kid from school. And it's been a good go-to for just like throwing over top, being cozy. So I think I'll get a lot of use out of it. I don't feel like cute and trendy in it. Laura had styled hers with like tights and a skirt, and then her like, you know, her sweater like tucked in and looked very like stylish, and I was like, oh no, that's not what I look like. But it's a very like wearable knit for me still, because it's just comfy and cozy and good for throwing over top of something to go pick up the kids, good for throwing on to go in the backyard, good for just lounging around the house, be good for a walk out on a crisp fall day, you know, that kind of thing. So anyways, so yeah, size 6, mine ended up being about 56 inches, so like whatever, it's like pretty much the same. One thing that I discovered was very important was that the row gauge of this pattern matters a lot. And Laura says that very specifically in her pattern. That's like, this pattern is graded based on row gauge, get as close as you can. And I did not do that. And I should have done that, because it made things a little bit complicated when I was trying to figure out how much I was supposed to be knitting. So the gauge of the pattern is 21 stitches by 32 rounds per 4 inches. And I had 20 stitches and 28 rounds per 4 inches. And so what that means is that, like I said, each stripe is 10 rounds. That all of my 10 rounds were a little bit bigger because all of my stitches are a little bit taller. And so just from like, you know, a couple rounds at a time, it doesn't matter, but over the like whole length of the sweater. So I figured out that if it, from the back of the neckline to the bottom, it would have been a difference of 3¼ inches if I hadn't made any modifications. And so like that's a big difference. And so when it's also determining how deep the neckline is and how deep the armhole is, and then also the length, and then also wanting to have the like colors match up properly. So like I wanted to do the cuffs in the main color, the lighter color, and so wanting to end on a contrast color stripe for the cuffs and the hem, like figuring that all out. I had to do a lot of adjusting, and so that's not ideal when you're doing a test knit, because I wasn't actually testing her pattern very well because I had to change things. So I imagine that other people will also run into that same thing. We're like, oh, my row gauge is off. I don't normally pay attention to row gauge. Like, I don't know if I've ever gotten the row gauge of a pattern in my life. So I've mentioned before that I'm a loose knitter, so that also applies to my row gauge. But if I get, like, my stitch gauge was on. But so for me to adjust to 4 less rounds per 4 inches for my row gauge, I could have tried a different type of needle. I use ChowGoo. I think are they stainless steel? I could have tried wooden needle maybe. Sometimes that can change it. I could have just like gone down a size and made my stitch gauge also smaller, and then just adjusted which size I made based on that, which like that's the normal math that I do anyways usually if I like don't quite get gauge in my swatch, or if I say, oh, I like this fabric, I'm just going to adjust what size I make, or like, you know, make sure my numbers are right to get the size that I actually want based on this fabric, blah blah blah. But I don't ever do that based on row gauge. I mostly ignore it. And so that is going to be a theme, because this sweater also, row gauge matters. Didn't get row gauge properly, caused me some problems. So I ended up having to make a few modifications on this. One of the first things I did was I adjusted the depth of the collar, or the size, the circumference, I guess, of the collar. And so this sweater you cast on the back and you work the back panel, you pick up stitches, work the front panel, join in the round, off you go. And Laura commented in her last podcast episode that some of the testers were saying like the neckline is really wide. I was one of those people, partly because mine was too wide because my row gauge was off. And so part of the circumference of the neckline is determined by the back like stitches, the cast on stitches on the back, but then some of it is this depth here, right, of like how many rows you're knitting down here, and then you go back and pick up the collar. And so because this was going to be longer, my collar was going to be much bigger. Laura ended up adding like a chunkier, it's double knit, like double folded, what's that called? Double folded neckband. And hers is much thicker, and so I could have done that. But I was like, I'll just make an adjustment. And so I adjusted some numbers a little bit at the front, and kind of hoped for the best. Anyways, I had to adjust how deep the neckline was. I paid extra attention to how deep my armhole was going to be, and I actually ended up knitting the size down for the arms because they would have been quite large. And so I don't think I wrote that down what the final measurements were supposed to be, but I think that this was like, this is plenty of ease. So anyways, something to keep in mind if this is a pattern that you're going to knit, when the pattern tells you row gauge is important. This pattern is graded based on row gauge. Get as close as you can. You need to heed that warning. So it ended up working out fine. I kind of wish I would have knit this a little bit deeper. I probably could have stuck with the original neckline and just like having the double folded collar like brings it in, right? It was looking like it was going to be big and gapey, but you can see on Laura's most recent podcast episode, well, who knows, by the time I post this, one of her more recent ones, she's wearing her sample in it. So one thing I am considering doing that I'm going to do today at least for this sweater, not going to commit to it forevermore, but I think I want to talk about what the cost of the yarn is that I buy. I've talked about that before. I've showed off my Barrington spreadsheet with all of my yarns and like based on weight and price per meter and all these things. But as I was picking yarn for this project, like I looked up so many different options, and I had considered knitting it with John Arbin Appledore DK, I want to say, which is quite pricey. But I was like, oh, that'd be so fun to like get to do this like test knit sweater in that. Laura's, one of her samples is knit in Sandnes Garn Double Sunday, and so I considered that. There's a store local to me that sells that. What I ended up knitting it with is Sandnes Garn Peergynt, and so it's also DK. It's not merino. The Double Sunday is merino, and so it's quite soft and lovely. This is Peergynt. I don't know what, I think it just says Norwegian wool. It's definitely more toothy, a bit prickly. It's fine next to skin for me. Like I just have like a t-shirt underneath here, and it's fine, but like you're aware of it, like you can feel it a bit. But I've been like, it was very nice to knit with, and bloomed very nicely when I blocked it. And Laura had made a comment on her podcast about the Double Sunday pilling a little bit, and hers I think is black and white, or like really dark navy and white, and so sometimes you could see the pills like on the alternate stripe, right? And so she said that's like, that's fine, it's lovely and soft, that's what I wanted, the pills don't bother me. And so I was like, oh, I should look at mine, because I've been wearing mine quite a bit. I finished it a few weeks ago, and the other day, last week, one day I was sick and curled up in bed with a fever with this on, and like with a blanket over top of me. I think I had my weighted blanket over top of me, and it was like curled up in bed and just like tossing and turning. And I was like, oh, I wouldn't normally do that in a hand knit sweater. And so then I was looking at it and I was like, oh, you can't tell. Like there's no pilling. Oh, there's a pill, I lied. There's one pill. I think it's a very hardy yarn. The description on the website said something about that it's like very old, like, I should just look up what it said. Peergynt has been on the market ever since 1938. The structure of the yarn makes it a favorite for knitting traditional kofta sweaters. Garments made of Norwegian wool are light, warm, and grow softer every time you wear them. Norwegian wool is durable and pill resistant, and its super resilience ensures that garments keep their shape over time. So I, so far, would say that to be true. It is definitely a yarn that I would return to. It comes in lots of different colors. Mine are olive. Well, I should have looked up what the numbers were. I hate when people are like, oh, this is the color 24176. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. But I think that the like word names for this one are arbitrary. So when I bought it, it said olive and gray beige heather. Other ones, I saw the green was being called something different, and like, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But there are lots of colors that it comes in, and I think it'd be a good like workhorse yarn. So I started saying about what the cost of it was. So these come in 50-gram balls. The store I bought them from, it was $6.95 per 50 grams, 91 meters per ball. And so I always like to calculate at what it is per meter, because if the put up is different, then it's hard to just compare prices, right? Like you have to be using the same units in order to like actually get a good comparison. And so this is 8 cents per meter. And so on my spreadsheet of like what my, usually as I'm like looking through trying to figure out a yarn and like figure out a price point, generally if it's like less than 10 cents per meter, it's like, I view that as like a bit more affordable. Double Sunday is 10 cents per meter. The Peergynt is, here I have 7 cents, but maybe the price sometimes changes on like the, depending which store I buy it from or whatever, right? Like it doesn't really matter. Let's see, another, okay, so for example, another DK, Brooklyn Tweed Arbor is 13 cents per meter. Drops Charisma, 6 cents per meter. Retrosaria Brusca DK, it's another like more affordable one, 7 cents per meter. So that's how I usually try and think about things. And I don't have it now, but what the John Urban would have been, but it was more than that for sure. So all said and done, approximately, this was $115 worth of wool. I ended up buying actually like way more than that, but was able to return it to the store, thankfully. But so what I actually like used based on my yardages, so I like, if I use 7.5 skeins, it's like, well, I had to buy 8 skeins. And so I calculated it based on like buying 8 full skeins. It was about $115. And so if I was just like going to a store and buying a sweater, I don't think I would probably buy a sweater for $115. When I think about that in terms of like knitting, like, oh, that's very affordable. The internet's been joking a lot about girl math lately and boy math and boomer math. This is like knitting math. It's like, oh, if I hand knit a sweater for $115, like then that's affordable. So it's part of why I don't want to like fully commit to talking about prices of things, is because money is a touchy subject. Obviously, it's what is affordable to some person is different than what's affordable to another person. What somebody wants to splurge on, what counts as a splurge to them, how they want to prioritize how they spend their money. Obviously, it's very personal. There's not some like hard and fast thing about it. It is something that I put a lot of time and energy into when I'm planning a project. And yeah, so we'll see how I feel after today, after talking about it. And then this is like an affordable sweater. I guess the yardage was a bit higher on this because it has 14 inches of positive ease. And so then obviously that means more yarn, blah, blah, blah. Some of my other like hand-dyed, indie-dyed yarn colorwork sweater is like obviously going to cost more money. And sometimes I don't necessarily want to know what the full price is, but I think it would be good for me to like go through that like final tallying, and then also just to like be able to talk about it more. So let me know, weigh in about that, if that's like, do those conversations just make you uncomfortable? Talking about money makes my skin crawl. But it's also something that I consider a lot in my knitting, and so if I have a value around working with wool primarily, as opposed to like synthetic yarns, that's a different price point. But there's a huge spectrum of price points within working with wool. And different yarn is for different purposes, and you get a different product out of it, etc. So anyways, that's that for now. Okay, I've traded sweaters, and just like immediately you can see like how much more drapey this one is on the dress form than this one. Different yarns, different gauges, color work, not color work obviously, but it's just kind of interesting to be able to see that. Okay, I've pulled this sweater on and off now a couple of times. So my other big project that I've been working on over the last few months, another test knit that's coming out in October. This is called the Mid-Mountain Pullover by the Bluebird Box. She's a local designer here in Alberta. I was really excited to get to test this for her. So this sweater has a release date now. It's going to be released October 19th. I believe it's a collaboration with Brooklyn Tweed, with their shelter base. That's what Anna knit hers in. I did mine in Custom Woolen Mills Mule Spinner 2-ply, which is a local wool to me. I don't know if all the wool is necessarily sourced in Alberta, but the mill is in a small town close to where I grew up, which I think is really cool. I'd really love to go and like do a mill tour sometime. So anyways, this is a top-down colorwork yoke. I really love how the different coloring works throughout the sweater, which is what definitely caught my eye about it. Let's see. To start with a corrugated rib on the top, and work the darker color. The body's finished in the lighter color, but then the arms finish in the darker color again. It was a really interesting yoke to knit, just like really kind of addictive of just like working through each section. I had a bit of gauge issues with this one. I think I knit 3 swatches for this sweater. Has that ever happened before in my life? No. I started swatching for this when I was in Montana, actually, at the Firmer Starter Fiber retreat, because I thought, oh, a swatch, like that's easy. Like the first day while we were like meeting everybody and like chit-chatting, and I was working on swatches. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I had to knit 3 before I got gauge. And then I started knitting the sweater, and just like immediately my gauge was like so off. So that was annoying. And it's caused a bit of problems on my yoke, which I think I'm not going to let it bother me. It's gotten better with blocking, but it gets a little bit bunchy here. It starts with corrugated rib, and so I swatched just for the like plain stockinette, and then went down a couple needle sizes or whatever for the corrugated rib, and immediately it was like so tight. It's like a bit of a like, oh, is this gonna fit over my head? And then it does, so it's okay. Not ideal when I'm actually like tried to style my hair a little bit because I'm putting my face on the internet. But anyway, so then when I started working the stockinette portion, it was like my gauge was so different than what my swatch said, and so I probably should have just like paused, ribbed back, gone up a needle size. Instead I just went up a needle size. So I think I like knit halfway down the like front yoke section, changed needle sizes, got to the color work section, adjusted my needle size anyways because I always go up a needle size for color work. It was too tight, went up another needle size, and like I'm pretty sure I didn't actually check what the gauge was at the bottom versus at this top here. I should have. This yarn is hard to read once it's blocked. The stitches really like blend together, and it's really hard to see the stitch definition. So it's hard to count, but anyways, it ended up being fine. However, this is another pattern that the row gauge is important. Because the split for the sleeves had to be a certain point in the color work section, the row gauge matters. I did not have the correct row gauge. Unsure if I had the correct stitch gauge while I was working on that portion. My when I measured it down here, it's correct. But my row gauge is off again. So let's see. Pattern row gauge is 28 rounds per 4 inches minus 25. Again, tried to do the math to figure out what all that difference would mean. The yoke depth would have ended up being like 1.25 inches different, which like that probably is not a big deal. But I still made some modifications. And so I ended up splitting for sleeves earlier than what the pattern said, and then used my last increase round before that to just make sure that I had the right stitch count for the split. I also ended up, when I was onto the sleeves on mine, I was using a different version of the pattern. Anna has since updated the pattern with a little bit more ease in the sleeves, but I was like, oh, I think the sleeves are going to be too tight on me. And so I also adjusted the number of stitches that I cast on underneath the arms to make sure I had the right, just to make sure that I had enough ease in the sleeves. Anna has since gone and like adjusted the pattern. I think she's provided 2 different options for that, of like a bit of a looser sleeve and a more tighter fitting sleeve. But I didn't go back and compare what like my adjustment was based on what her new pattern says. But anyways, I'm happy with the ease I have here. I can wear something underneath of it now without any concerns. And I do like in hers, she has like, it's a bit of like a slouchy fit, but then quite like narrow sleeves. And I think that looks really nice. So that was one of the adjustments that I made based on my row gauge being off. And then I had to make a few decisions on the sleeves because I really liked the sleeve patterning that she had. But because I like split earlier, I was missing one of the repeats then like just above the sleeve. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyways, I still wanted to include that color work section on the sleeve. And so my sleeves are a little bit too long because of that. I wanted to have like a good sort of chunk of this like just plain stockinette at the bottom to kind of balance it out. But because of that, my sleeves are a little bit long for me. But I think it's probably actually just fine because it's cozy and like, yeah, oversized. And another thing I did though was that I changed the pattern. Is written with corrugated rib on the cuff as well, and I didn't do that. partly because this has like no stretch to it at all, and I like usually I have to be able to pull up my sleeves or I get like panicky. So I just opted for a regular rib, and so it's not quite the same look as the pattern, but I like knew that it was going to be a necessity for me. I don't know if it's just because I'm more used to adjusting things as I go on a top-down colorwork yoke, because that's like the most common sweater that I've knit. You know my problems with raglans. Those I've had to adjust, and those have been hard. The sibling sweater is drop shoulder construction, and like a different, I haven't done that kind of construction before, I think, on the top, where you like just start on the back and pick up for the front and then join in the round. Anyways, this one didn't cause me quite as much stress trying to make the adjustments that I needed to, and Anna, the designer, was very helpful in like kind of helping everybody navigate that. But if you want to have a simpler time knitting the sweater, then probably it would be wise to follow the gauge that the pattern suggests. So will I learn from this? No. Again, if I want to talk about the cost of this sweater, I immediately was like, wait, what's the best way to do this? Because like I said with this one, I ended up buying way more than I needed, and then I returned it. Thankfully, the store I was able to. I must have actually zoomed through this sweater, because the store has like a 30-day return policy, and I was just in on the, like I had like 2 days to spare. I was like so glad that I was able to like catch that. And the person at the store was like, oh, like this is like, did you not like the yarn? I was like, no, I love the yarn. I just like it, bought way too much of it. And so the price of the yarn that goes into the sweater might be different than what the price of the yarn that you purchase, because if you don't use it all, actually, I'll talk about that next, about a different sweater that I'm knitting that I had to buy a lot of yarn for, but I'm not going to use. Anyways, I was trying to figure out how much of this one I used. I didn't weigh my leftovers on this one, so I don't know what I had left over. I just know how much I had bought initially, but then I just weighed the sweater, and so those numbers are different. I bought 7 skeins, which is approximately $88, but the sweater only uses 4.5 skeins. Is that right? Oh my goodness, let me see. So the sweater is 505 grams. If my like balancing it on my little kitchen scale on my floor just now, it was correct. Unsure. I should have done a bit more. I should have made a more careful note of how much I used. And I don't know where my leftovers ended up. I finished this sweater quite a while ago, and so I don't know what happened to the leftovers of it. And I've been reorganizing in here, so they probably have been like sitting right here for, you know, a month, and then just a week ago I cleaned, and so now they're put away and I don't know where they are. But from what I bought 7 skeins. That's about $88 worth of yarn. These are $11.99 for 112 gram skein. And so again, with the like, what else comes in 112 grams? Nothing. And so I guess that's also 4 ounces. And so that maybe makes more sense, but either have to convert that cost to 100 grams to like get an idea of what that would typically be with other yarns, or the price per meter. So this is 6 cents per meter. Pure Gint was about 8. Yeah, about 8 cents per meter. So this is even less expensive. An $88 sweater, like that's pretty good to me. That's pretty affordable for a hand knit sweater. Birdie has come to join us now. You want to say hi? You gonna come sit? Okay, that was a really long time to be talking about 2 sweaters. I do have an update about my whip from last time, which is my Instinct Crush pullover, so let's talk about that. Okay, this is my Instinct Crush pullover, which is a pattern by Joji Locatelli that was released maybe in August or September, I can't remember. This is my version. I knit this once before for as a pattern, like as a sample for Frankie Gray Fibers. The pattern is designed in mohair held double, which works up to about a DK weight, and so this one I'm actually knitting in DK. So last time I think I had only started the top bit of the color work, and then I was trying to decide on my color. I did not like the color that I chose, my final color that I chose. The main color is this brown, which is walnut, denim, what's this one? Black cherry, I believe, and then phantom. And so I still really like how this looks in theory, but when I knit up my swatch, thank goodness I knit a swatch, I didn't like this one. It felt like there was it was too high contrast, and I didn't like it. And so then I proceeded to rummage through my stash, pull out a bunch of different options. I duplicate stitch over my swatch. See if that shows up or not. This one's kind of like a lighter pinkish color. This is actually Peer Gynt, is a skein I happen to have. And then this one is like a more bluish kind of purple color. And so that's what I was going to go with. Then I got it in my head that I was going to try and dye the 2 skeins of Phantom that I had. It's like, well, I'd already bought them. I'd found this place where I could buy just like a sample of some different dye colors. I like made up some little mini skeins of it so I could do a test of like the color. They were like, it cost me like $5 to like order this dye. That'll be fun to like try that out. And then the dye came. Then I started having to figure out, like, I don't really understand the math of, it's like brings me back to chemistry, making solutions of like X grams of whatever per however many milliliters of water. And at that time, I did not have the brain space to be figuring that out. And so it just sat there. And then I went to the Prairie Fiber Festival, which is in Lacombe, Alberta, and told my husband I'm not going to buy any yarn. And he's like, okay, sure. But I wasn't planning to buy yarn. I did buy a project bag, and I bought, isn't that pretty? I have to look up, I'll put who it was, the maker, down below, because I don't remember. Oh, Kate Shea Quilts. But while I was wandering around looking at the yarn in person, and I forgot to I didn't even bring my swatch along. I was going to bring it along just in case, just so I could look at things in person. I like pulled up pictures on my phone and was like holding up yarn to my phone to look at it. But I bought this, 2 skeins of this yarn. So this is from Sassy Strings Yarn Studio. This is called Antique Rose. This is basically the color that I was going to be aiming for with my dyeing experiment. And so then this would be my palette. Not as high contrast, it's just the like light gray. Wonderful. Started knitting. I knit to here, I think. This is where that pink stripe would have been. If you notice, it is not there. And I was like, okay, I still don't like it. It's still too much contrast for me. And so then I hemmed and hawed because I had bought 4 skeins of yarn now that I was not going to use. Okay, I don't really want to buy 2 more skeins of yarn now for this project. My backup plan, if my dye experiment wasn't going to work, is that I would just buy some more Frankie Gray Fibers, because they have tons of different colors. But they're $27 a skein, which is actually that's like $5 cheaper than most. But still, that's still another $54 that I needed to spend, that I didn't want to spend. Also, I was a bit unsure about the actual yardages that I needed because Again with the row gauge, the row gauge of mohair held double is different than just like a merino DK. And so the yardage amount was like a little bit of a guesstimate about how much I was actually going to need. I'm kind of thinking I'm going to end up using like 1.1 skeins of each of my colors, which like that feels super annoying, right? Because you still have to buy that whole other skein. Anyways, when I went to go return the leftover purgent that I had, I was like, I'm in person at a yarn store, and I brought my swatch along, and so I went around with my 5-year-old in the store and looked at every single yarn in the store pretty much. So what I ended up getting was this Estelle double knit. I can't decide if it's gray or blue. Again, this is one of the ones that's like, this is color Q65504. Isn't that so helpful? It is, let me look, I wrote it down. It's 50% acrylic, 40% wool, 10% nylon. Wouldn't have been my normal pick of like, I don't generally enjoy working with acrylic. This is actually pretty nice. I can tell that it's different than the just like merino nylon one, but it's like, it's pretty good. Doesn't feel squeaky. It's like a bit shiny, but like not bad. I think it works just fine. So anyways, that is what is in my sweater now. In the camera, the light blue is standing out a lot more than it does in real life, but I am happy with how this is going now. I did not like ripping back and like undoing a couple inches worth of color work, but I knew that it was going to be worth it in the end. I didn't want to keep going and then feel disappointed in my sweater, because I think this is going to be a sweater that's like a really like go-to one for me. So once I changed out my color, then I was good to go. I talked quite a lot about my joys of knitting Braglins in some of my other episodes when I was working on the mohair version of this sweater. It went much more smoothly this time. The pattern's really good. It's really nicely charted. So like when you have to do an increase along the raglans, like that's all charted for you. So you don't have to like figure out where your pattern is like increase in pattern, but it like tells you how to do that so that you're not having to figure that out yourself, which I always appreciate. And yes, it definitely went smoother the next time around. And so I have a couple inches below the armhole. And this time I'm not catching any floats. I did catch floats in the other sample. And ended up doing ladder back jacquard on that one, because if I was just catching floats the way I normally do, because the gauge was so loose and because the colors were contrasted, you could see where I was catching them. So I didn't like that, and so I ended up doing ladder back jacquard, which is kind of like, it's a super handy technique, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. Tracy from the Grocery Girl said that she did not catch floats once in hers, and I was like, oh, okay, I want to give that a try. And I am getting a little bit of puckering. We'll see in this section here. You can tell. I haven't I steam blocked just like the top part before I split, but I haven't steamed the rest of it. Because this is superwash merino, I think it's going to be fine. The longest stretch that I have is 7 stitches normally, except sometimes around the raglan you end up with more than that depending on where you are at in the pattern, and so those I did catch at the raglan line, but you couldn't tell because there's already other things going on there with the increases and stuff. But otherwise it's 7 stitches across. Normally I would be catching on that like 3rd, 4th stitch or whatever. So anyways, yeah, I think that this is going to be a very good like wearable sweater for me. Like I was saying before, it's like, okay, when you're calculating the cost of your sweater, do you calculate based on the amount of yarn that actually is physically in your sweater, or do you count it based on the amount of yarn you had to buy in order to make the sweater? Because this one I ended up buying 4 additional skeins of yarn that I am not going to need. I will use them or I will sell them. Okay, my battery ran out. So don't remember exactly where I was at. I was talking about my Instant Crush pullover. I don't think I had anything more to say about it. And if I did, whatever, I'll catch it the next time. And then the other thing that I've been doing is another test knit. And then first let me tell you a funny story about test knitting. The first test knit that I did was last fall, about a year ago. It's for a baby sweater that I was going to knit for my daughter. It was a good foray into test knitting. It's kind of funny trying to explain test knitting to people who aren't knitters. Like, oh wow, that's so great, like somebody pays you to knit. Like, oh no. Like, oh, they give you the yarn? Like, no. Oh, they pay you for your time? No. No, you buy the yarn, you knit the sweater, give the pattern, give the designer feedback, and you get the satisfaction of a job well done. I like getting to see the like behind the scenes kind of stuff, I think, of what goes into making a pattern. I will never be a knitwear designer. Sometimes people start podcasts and then they become a knitwear designer. That will not be my journey. It's not my skill set. I would be more suited to tech editing, and so that is something that I've looked into before, and I think that's part of too what I like about the test knitting, is like examining the pattern. Anyways, I like 2 test knits, another one on the way, but a week ago maybe, I got added to a thread on Instagram, like a you know, like a DM thread. Well, I kind of think of what else that's called. I don't know. It doesn't matter. For a test knit. And I was like, I just don't remember applying for this test knit. I'm so confused. I'm like, everybody seemed to know what was going on. I did not know what was going on. And I was like racking my brain. Like, did I apply for this like late at night when I wasn't paying attention? I did order yarn the other day, like at 11:30 p.m. But I remember that I did that. But you know, like people joke about that, right? That they like shop in the middle of the night and they don't remember that until the package shows up the next day, or like whatever, until the package shows up. Like, did I apply for a test knit and like not pay attention to like that I actually did it? I like went back in my emails to see if I you know, if you like submit a Google form, sometimes it like sends you the responses. Nope, couldn't find it. I was like, I swear I've never seen this sweater before. So confused. So I got in touch with the designer and I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. So it turns out that there was somebody else who had a really similar username as me, and that's who was supposed to be added. And I was literally just added by mistake. And I was like, okay, I'm not like just frantically applying for test knits all the time that I like can't even remember that I have applied for them. But this next one is one that I was very excited about, did plan for, did remember that I applied for it, and then was very happy that I got in on it. It's from Florence Sperling. Her Scout shawl is like one of my bucket list items to knit. Every time I'd just be like scrolling on Instagram and like see it, like, oh, what is that? And then I'd see, oh, the Scout shawl. And then like, you know, a little while later I'd scroll like, oh, that's so beautiful. What is that? Oh, it's the Scout shawl. It's like now I know what it is. I just think it's just such a masterpiece of knitting to me. And so I was really excited to see this test knit come up from Florence Sperling. The Scout shawl is intarsia and colorwork, and I have now since done intarsia, and I talked about last episode about working colorwork flat for the top of my sweater I was wearing in that one, but that was like as much as I had ever done before. And so this is called the Anuka tank, I think that's how you pronounce it, and the front panel has all over color work, as well as 3 intarsia panels that are also color work. It's knit in pieces and seamed, so it's like color work flat as well as intarsia. And I was like, I was ready for the challenge, and so I was really excited to get in on that test knit opportunity. It's 5 colors, and that meant I had to pick 5 different colors of yarn, which was a thing to do. Yeah, again, if you've seen some of my other episodes, it takes me a long time to pick colors. I guess I just talked about that with my Instant Crush pullover too, of that saga. Anyways, the sample of this sweater is knit in my yak. I want to say it's like a yak silk base. I can't remember exactly. I knew right away that I wanted to knit it in Jamieson & Smith. And so I happen to have some random assortment of Jamieson & Smith that I had just, my local yarn store started carrying it. And so I had just like bought some random colors with no purpose like a long time ago. And so I pulled them all out and like started playing with different colors, and that was nice actually to like have some options in front of me that I got to like see in person. But and so I knit up a swatch. Let me pull it up. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is my second swatch, so it's just little. This is just me testing my colors. And I wanted to change these colors in the middle here. I can't tell. So I went in person, brought my swatch, had my paper with all my colors, had the like pattern printed out, and like because it's 5 colors, this one's color 1 and color 5, and this is color 3 and 5, and this one is 2 and 4 and whatever. It's like it was hard for my brain to like figure out what needed to go where. Anyways, I stood in front of the wall of Jamieson & Smith at the Fiber Nook and picked out colors, and I think I like what I've ended up with here. So I did start with the back panel, which is just all over color work and not intarsia. And so this is where I'm at with that. There's a stripping at the bottom, and then there's 2 separate color work sections, and then just a really subtle color work up the back panel. And then I'm just getting going on the front. And it's going to be all tangly because intarsia is chaotic. So let's see. So this first section is the same as the back, and that'll go up the sides, and then there's a panel here. This is the kind of center main panel, and then another matching one there. It's just a tank, and so I would call it a vest, I guess, like how I'll wear it. Like it'll probably have I'm thinking like a chambray shirt underneath kind of thing, you know, like a button up chambray underneath. And yeah, it's been fun so far. I was definitely intimidated starting it. The swatch, this was a time when like the swatch was not just for me figuring out my gauge. I actually got gauge like pretty quickly, and I got gauge with the needles suggested in the pattern, which literally never happens ever. Obviously that's variable, like it depends on the designer's own tension, whatever. But I was just surprised, like because I'm a loose knitter, I always size down, and then I was like, oh, this is too tight, I had to go back up again. So but getting to play with the colors, and then also just like practice the techniques. I'm in a Facebook group, I can't remember which one it is now. I think it's about like just for stranded knitting. Somebody posted a video of them working on their scout shawl, and they were doing, they were knitting the wrong sides backwards. And so the right side was always facing, and then they would just like knit backwards the other way. And so they were showing how that technique works. So then you're not flipping your work around. You don't have to flip around all of your like, you know, chaos. And so I wanted to try that. And so I was experimenting with that on my swatch. If I'm just knitting stockinette, I can knit backwards instead of having to purl. I'm faster when I purl, so that's like, it doesn't really feel like what's the point? But I just wanted to experiment. Trying to do that with 2 strands proved to be tricky. And so I also experimented doing Portuguese style, where like where it like either like clips onto you or like goes around the back of your neck, and then that you tension it, and then it's like the strands are coming from your neck, and then you just like grab which one you need to knit with. I experimented with that on my swatch. What turns out is just like the simplest for me is just to knit my normal way, and I just have to I knit continental yarn, both yarns are in my left hand, and I just grab whichever one I need. One thing that was interesting trying to figure out was how to catch floats on the purl side, which that I don't think I've ever done before. I looked up a couple videos on YouTube, but they were all doing either English style or like whatever it's called when you knit with both hands, showing how to catch it. And I was trying to knit with both of them in my left hand. And so when I had to catch a float, I just like sat there and stared at my knitting, and it was like, okay, what if I just like so I can pull it through. It's like, no, that didn't work. Like okay, I know, I'll go and pull it through. And like, no, I didn't catch it that time. Or like, oh, I accidentally like caught both strands that time. And I just like sat and stared at it. And then I'd like, okay, I'd figure it out. So I'd like work my way across the row. And like next time I got to her, I had to catch one. I was like, wait, what did I do before? And like kind of make up something. And then I realized like, oh, I was doing it a more complicated way. And like, this is actually an easier way to do it. I'm pretty sure every time I've had to catch a float, I just do it in a different way. Couldn't tell you what I'm doing. It just seriously like a do-do-do-do-do-do. Like that's my technique. Isn't that so helpful? Don't know what I'm doing. Don't know why it works. Whatever, I'm catching a float. And it's kind of fun to like, yeah. And I just like double check, like, did that actually catch? Yes, okay. Did it catch through to the front side? No? Okay, we're good. So the Intarsia bit has been slow. I always remake my colorwork charts in the colors that I'm using, because otherwise I cannot understand what's happening. And then I usually use Knit Companion then to follow my charts with. But I was having a hard time keeping track of where I was. And so I ended up printing out my chart, with that I never do. Never do that. Partly I wanted to do that because if I'm sitting watching YouTube, which is usually what I do, I'll either watch Only Murders in the Building or watch knitting podcasts. Then I'm having to use my iPad for my keeping track of my pattern. And then I'm just like watching something on my phone. So now I have my pattern printed out, put in my binder. I put some sticky notes over so I could keep track of my rows, and it's actually working pretty good. I've had to readjust my my bobbins a few times for my Intarsia. I have to stop and untangle myself a few times. The wrong side takes quite a bit of time, but then I found like, oh yeah, I got to the end. Like, okay, well I'll just zoom through the next right side row because it's quick. And then like, oh well, I'll just work and do this next wrong side row. Like, oh well, now I'm back to the right side. I'll just zoom and do another right side row. So it's slow going, but it's I'm kind of like getting into the rhythm of it. I knit the back panel up to where the pattern says to start shaping for the sleeves, but I'm gonna knit it longer, and so I need to like do a little bit of figuring that out before I keep going. Anyways, I think that the pattern the test is due the beginning of November. Questionable if I'm gonna get that done or not, but I will do my best. I am definitely more in a rhythm of it now. Just like over the last couple days I started doing the Intarsia, and I think once I like get into the groove of it a bit more, it's fine. The Intarsia part actually isn't, like the yarn management is hard. The actual technique of doing the Intarsia is not hard. And once you figure it out, it's like, it feels really intimidating until you get it, and then you're like, oh, that's not complicated. What I find tricky is all the yarn management, because it starts to feel kind of chaotic, and like I have to untangle things, and that stresses me out. But anyways, so this is my big project that I'm working on right now. I don't know if I have a picture of all of my colors set out, but if I do, I'll include that. So in theory, that one will go, like there's no sleeves to knit. So that's like half of a sweater right there, right? That doesn't have to get done, but it is slow going because of the Intarsia. So I mentioned, I think at the start, that I have a spinning class coming up, and I don't think I've talked about spinning at all so far. I'm a motivated beginner spinner. I bought a spinning wheel a couple of years ago. I found one like secondhand that was like a really good deal. They were getting rid of a whole bunch of fiber along with it. I have an Ashford Joy, an older version, so it's just a single treadle. It folds up for travel. It's like I really enjoy it. It has been very intimidating starting to learn how to spin. And I used to watch, might be called Woolen Spinning with Rachel Smith. And so she is a very prolific knitter, spinner, weaver, and has so much information in her podcast. But it was like, that was not the good place for me to start. Be like, I want to learn how to spin, because it was like overwhelming. I got this book, Yarn and Texture by Jillian Moreno. And so I've been looking through this. I've done a class through School of Sweet Georgia, which I was really good. I took an in-person spinning class through the Olds College at their like fiber week. Yeah, I think that's all. I had signed up for a spinning class here through my local like Weavers Guild, but I think they didn't, at the time, they didn't have enough people sign up, or might have got cancelled because of COVID. I can't remember exactly. Anyways, I have felt like I needed, like I know enough that I can't just do a beginner spinning class. Oh yeah, I've also done one working with art bats here with Curious Fox Fibers up here in Edmonton. That one was a fun one. And so that one was kind of a more like, hey, you already know how to use your wheel, like here's something else that you can do. The one that I'm doing here upcoming is called like Next Steps in Spinning or something. Because I knew this class was coming up, I was sorting through all of my spinning, all of my fiber. And so because when I bought the wheel, it came with just like bags of stuff. And lots of it I've actually gotten rid of. Lots of it was like oranges and browns and reds and stuff that I was like, oh, I'm not gonna, this isn't what I want to knit with. I'm not gonna bother spinning it. And so I've sold a bunch of it. I kept the things that I liked the most, which was mostly blues and purples and whites and grays. But I hadn't organized it at all. And so I went through the other day, I took pictures of it all, I added it to my Ravelry, tried to make sense of what I had. And then I was like, oh, this is nice fiber, I want to try spinning this. Just like, it'd been a while to get back into it. So this is what I was working on. I don't know how well that, can't tell if this is focusing or not. This is a mystery, pretty sure it's BFL, Blueface Leicester, that came with my wheel that I have no idea what, I couldn't tell you anything else about it, but I am very happy with how this single is turning out. This is just my first bobbin, but it's very even. It felt very easy to draft out and spin. I was able to like keep it even. That's been, you know, as I'm learning, just like trying to keep things consistent has been hard. Anyways, part of why I haven't talked about my spinning, I don't show myself spinning on Instagram hardly ever, is I'm not confident enough in it, in my ability to talk about it and pretend like I know what I'm talking about. And then also just like feel very fearful of someone being like, you're doing it wrong. So, you know, sometimes people say like there's no knitting police, and there's also no spinning police, but like sometimes there is. And because I don't really know, like, I don't know what technique I'm doing. I don't know. Yeah, it just feels intimidating to talk about it more freely. I like feel very confident in my knitting, and so it feels more, it feels less vulnerable, I think, to talk about it. And it's like when I know that I'm messing up something, like, hey, you should probably follow the gauge of the pattern, Otherwise you're going to run into problems. It's like I still feel confident, I guess, enough in my knitting abilities to like talk about like, here's all the mistakes that I made. And it's like I don't even know enough about my spinning to know like, here's all the mistakes I've made. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, here's a skein of yarn, I guess. This was the other one that I've done, which I think is also BFL actually. This was from a local dyer to me, Allison Barnes. But it's like, it's uneven, and it's like, I've never knit with my hand spun is another thing. The Christmas that I got my wheel, my sister-in-law gave me a, I don't know what you would call it, like a weaving kit, I guess. I don't know if you can see it. I don't think you can. I have it up on the wall. Let me just grab it. This is like my wall tapestry kind of weaving thing that I did. And so it was a kit. It came with a bunch of different things, but this section here is some of the very first hand spun. And so this was perfect for it because it's like very uneven. And I love that it's like hanging on my wall now. And so like all the rest of this was like stuff that came in the kit, but then, yeah, I was able to add my own hand spun to it. But that's the only thing I've ever done with my hand spun. And yeah, I won't go into it all right now. Part of it is like, how are you supposed to know how much you have? What if you don't have the right thickness? What about when you have to gauge swatch and now you've like used up, if you only have 100 grams of fiber and now you have to like knit a swatch, then you're wasting your like precious hand spun in order to swatch so that you can know what to knit with it. Anyways, that's been a deterrent for me. I might take some pictures or maybe videos of the spinning class, and I'll probably talk about it next time about what I learned and stuff. So I just wanted to show off my bobbin. Okay, I think that is everything. I don't know how long I've been talking here for. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for sticking around. If you've made it this far to the end, I can recommend both of these patterns that I've been doing these sweater tests for. I'm looking forward to them actually being released and getting to see all the other, like for everyone to get to see all of the versions that were knit. They all are different and unique, and that's fun. And like I said, I like being part of that behind the scenes thing about like seeing it all come together. And so then when it's like, oh, it's finally here, I think that'll be fun. So hope that you enjoy hearing about them. And I have lots of information up on Ravelry about my my patterns. I try and update that when I can. And I try and link everything below in the description box if you're like, what was that she said? Or wait, what was that yarn again? Or whatever. I like links. Also, if Ravelry isn't accessible to you, you can reach out to me and I will happily share information with you that way. You can find me on Instagram as paper.knits, and then on Ravelry I am thisispaperknits. And usually I'm like more active on Instagram. Haven't been as much this month, but we'll see what's to come. I have a few things planned for just things coming up here in the fall. It's easier to post on Instagram than to make a whole podcast and post it on YouTube, so come find me there if you want. I always love finding new people to follow on Instagram. And actually, I always love finding new podcasts on YouTube too. So if you have a favorite one that you think I should know about, let me know. Leave a comment, let me know. Because usually I find somebody, I binge watch all of their episodes, and then I'm like, oh, well now what do I do? So I'm always looking for more. And yeah, I hope that everyone else is enjoying their fall knits, and that you're also able to start wearing some more of your knitwear as the weather starts to change. We've had beautiful fall days here. It's been really windy, but like beautiful colors. Edmonton has a really beautiful river valley, and so seeing all the fall colors throughout the river valley is like always delightful. And it's been fun to like open up my closet and be like, which cowl do I want to wear today, or like which toque, and yeah, that's been fun. Okay, that's all for me for now. I'll catch you next time. Happy knitting!